I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. My name is Jesse Carlson. Most of you know where that speech came from. It was spoken on the Lincoln Memorial in the 1960s by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. One of the reasons why I come before you today to speak about this subject, which if anybody hasn't guessed from all the other speakers, we might be touching on a critical race theory subject. The reason I come before you is because I come from a mixed race family. My mother have 4 children. All of us are 5 years apart. I'm half Mexican, my little sister's half black, my little brother's a quarter Korean, and my other little sister's 100% Wisconsin German white. Okay? Yeah. We're about as mixed as you get, okay? We're the United Nations. I always used to make jokes when I was a kid. If I married a Persian, nobody'd ever be able to accuse me of being a racist. I picked an Irish redhead instead. Still pretty rare. I don't know how much y'all know about critical race theory, but one of those things is critical race theory, one of the main tenets of it is racism is in everything. That's all they see. Whether all the way from the architecture of your buildings to the roads on the streets to every piece of academia that our professor is part of, every bit of it they see through the lens of race. They don't see God's children. They don't see us as brothers and sisters in Christ or even equals under God. They see everything based on your skin color. So you can understand why a family like mine is very terrified of such an ideal taking root in this world. You would literally rip my family apart. You would accuse my mother of being a racist when her own children are of a different racial blend. You would tell her that the only reason she had those children was so that she could dominate them, that she could have power over them. This is the evils of critical race theory. The history of critical race theory, a lot of it started from the Frankfurt School in Germany in the 1920s. A lot of it got mixed in with an Italian version of Marxism. I say Marxism. A lot of people like to define it as socialism, communism, or fascism. I'll tell you one thing that a lot of the history books don't want to talk to you about on that note. All of it is rooted from Karl Marx. None of those systems would have existed without Karl Marx in the way we see them today. So Frankfurt School of Germany, 1920, for anybody that's taking notes. All of that started to really form, as it came out of the 1920s, they mixed it in with like an Italian version of socialism that was left over from World War II. Okay, as that started to spread through academia in the 50s and 60s, liberation theology started to become a thing. Marxism slowly started to infect the United States. You understand the difference between the Reverend Martin Luther King's dream and Malcolm X. Malcolm X was the Marxist, Reverend Martin Luther King was the Christian. Anybody that knows about the worldview and the way those situations worked will understand why we pick Reverend Martin Luther King and we hold him up as the ideologue and not Malcolm X. And if you know anything about the history of Malcolm X, you'll also understand at the end of his life, he agreed with Reverend Martin Luther King that his way was the only way to do things. Liberation theology is a version of critical race theory. It's all based on critical theories, which is what everybody, when they're talking about social justice, really is talking about. Critical theories is based strictly on a situation where everything in society, everything in your life is about power and control. It's about the haves and the have-nots, the oppressors and the oppressed. No one in this room is in charge of their own life. The only thing you're allowed to do is what the oppressor allows you to do. In critical race theory, this is generally perceived as the white person, one half of me. The other half of me is supposed to be oppressed by this half of me. I'm really confused. Is it top or bottom, left and right? Ask the wife. I don't know. Anyway, okay, the scary part about all of this is that it teaches that everyone in this room, based solely on the color of their skin, the melanin, nothing more than a small, insignificant part of your DNA, defines exactly how you think, how you act, and what you do in this world. We don't believe that. We believe in Martin Luther King's dream of a colorless society, of a world where you are judged on the content of your character and not by the color of your skin. When I was growing up as a kid, I heard those words over and over and over again. Every civics class I took, every commercial that wanted to harken back to those times quoted Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King. And I believed those words. I grew up thinking that exact same thing. I believed when I was in high school that in 100 years, race wouldn't even matter anymore because I figured there'd be so many families like mine where we're all mixed together, all you'd be able to tell is shades. And at that point, race would become obsolete. Makes sense to me. Hey, I was a high schooler. What do you want from me? So my dream was of that colorless society, of where we were nothing more than shades and pigments, and none of that mattered. Critical race theory seeks to destroy that. It seeks to destroy the homogeny that we have built in the United States after the struggles from the 1960s, from the 1920s, from the Civil War, and all the way dating back to our revolution. From the very beginning, Thomas Jefferson's rough draft of the Declaration of Independence, the one letter he wanted to send to the king himself so he would read it, specifically stated in capital letters that this king had sent judgment against men. He capitalized the word men. That he took them from their lands and forced them into bondage. Men that had never done anything to him or in any way offended him. This was one of the biggest issues Thomas Jefferson had with the crown in England. And if you ever get the chance, I highly recommend you look up that rough draft. It's absolutely beautiful. So to anybody who wants to tell you, which is what 1619 in critical race theory will tell you, that this country was founded on racism and slavery, I'm here to tell you, we're in a church I can't swear. But it's BS, okay? All you got to do is do a little research, do a little history. Okay, so critical race theory, that's what it is. It sees everything through the lens. This is spreading everywhere, okay? This is in our schools. In the version of liberation theology, it has infected our churches. Liberation theology comes from the idea of critical theory. I don't know how many people in here have heard of either Reverend Wright or Jeremiah Wright or Louis Farrakhan. Louis Farrakhan and Jeremiah Wright, and including the new senator from Georgia, who I can't remember his name right now, Warnock, thank you, all believe in a version of critical theory, in a version of critical race theory. They have hid it under the guise of liberation theology. This is what the Nation of Islam teaches. This is what a lot of churches are out there that have gotten infected with. And this is spreading like a disease. And this is something that has to be stamped out at the root. And the only way to do that is to understand and know where it comes from. It has no objective reality. There are no truth but power to these people, which is one of the things that our professor talked about and several of the others have talked about. That's why you see this spread through academia. That's why you see this spread through the world, because they are turning you into a victim. And it's a lot easier to be a victim than it is to be responsible for your own life. So that's what we're looking for. That's what we're teaching. This is how this is spreading. So we've already signed some bills here in Texas that they're working on pushing a lot of this through to see how this goes. The problem with that is even when we pass those bills, we have teachers in New York and California that are on the record, on the news. You can watch the video, you can hear the words from their own mouth that they said they don't care what the law says, they're going to teach it to your kids anyway. How to fix this? Constant vigilance. Anybody that's a Harry Potter fan knows constant vigilance. Mad-Eye Moody, it was something he'd scream and scare the hell out of everybody in the room. By constant vigilance, I mean we have to keep up with this stuff. We have to keep an eye on it. We have to look at our school boards. We have to keep an eye on our churches. If we have a new politician move into the area, these are people we need to vet. These are people we need to talk to. This is not a disease that we can allow to spread. This is a cancer that will literally rip all of us apart and divide us into subgroups to where we are constantly fighting with each other, and that's their goal. Constantly fighting with each other so they can do whatever they want to extract as much wealth out of our system as possible. So, do not accept their premise. Push back against their arguments. You will often hear them say, well, that's my truth. There is no truth but truth. they will try to use that and warp that to you to make it their opinion, that they should feel, that the way they feel is the most important. Well, I'll tell you right now, you can scream at a bus all you want. It ain't going to care about how you feel when you hit it. Get back to God, church. I think I'm kind of preaching to the choir on that one. So, if any of y'all want any more information on this, I've got a couple of books I'd like to recommend to you. One of them is Cynical Theories by James Lindsay. It expands a lot on this, goes into detail about the specifics and the history of it. And another one is Fault Lines by Dr. Vadi Bachman. Sorry about that. He's an African preacher that is actually an originally United States citizen. Fault Lines is another one. Also, if you want any more information about this or any other of the topics I talk about, check out The Common Man Corpus Christi on YouTube. I'm going to leave you with one last quote. It's my favorite from my favorite founding father. It's also at the dome. It's on the dome of his memorial in Washington, D.C. I highly recommend you visit. Thomas Jefferson, I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man. And I can't think of a better commitment for all of us. Thank you.